Okay, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the reading of chapter 16, Don't Let Go. So this is another chapter, power-packed with healing, looking at freedom, what is true freedom, wrongness, undoing, temptation of just wanting to choose an easier way rather than really facing and continuing with the undoing. The topic of integrity comes up. And yeah, this is all set in Venezuela. So at the time where there's a going through of all of this intense volatility in my mind, Kirsten's mind. At the same time, the president of Venezuela was enacting mock war games. So it was all very reflective of what was going on internally. Another very deep chapter with a lot of healing and undoing and really seeing the ego for what it is, the self-concept for what it is, and having to choose once again. So we'll just take a moment just to drop in. Yeah, just... Thank you. Yeah, and just another profound chapter of showing how time and space are all arranged for the healing. Like truly, when our call is solid, is absolute, like I want to awaken, I want to go through this healing, then everything is arranged for it. And it's just so profound to keep seeing this over and over again. That truly the whole universe is a reflection of mind. And when it has this purpose of supporting our awakening, then that's truly the purpose that it has. Okay. So chapter 16, Don't Let Go. Fall 2005. And there's a quote from the Course to set up the whole chapter. Learn then the happy habit of response to all temptation to perceive yourself as weak and miserable with these words: I am as God created me. His Son can suffer nothing, and I am his Son. Off to Venezuela. Leaving our beloved friends in Colombia, we headed for Venezuela where Carolina and her course group would host us for 2 weeks. The Spirit guided me to go back to basics and repeat some of the early workbook lessons. When I believed the world was in chaos around me and my emotions were high, the early lessons were perfect for focusing my thoughts and applying the teachings. It was the same as the first time I did the lessons. I found that no matter what was happening, my lesson for the day was the perfect answer to every situation. The president of Venezuela was enacting mock war games against the US during our visit. To me, it was a perfect reflection of the volatility going on in my own mind. Other course teachers had been invited to the country to teach during the games, but had refused because of the high risk factor. As always, David went where the Spirit guided. His encounters were always miraculous in nature, whether they were with people holding babies or people holding machine guns. This trip was clearly part of a larger plan of awakening for me. There was absolutely no question of whether we should be there or not. Our hosts had poured their hearts into promoting our visit in order to cover our airfares and reach all manner of groups. Carolina had set up television and radio interviews with David to let everyone in the region know about our upcoming gatherings. She believed that everyone wanted to awaken and that everyone should know about the gift that was on its way. I joined in on 2 of the radio interviews and saw how the Spirit could speak to any topic. The show hosts felt heard and supported by David's words and became as engaged as any sincere course student. On the sports show, in between the announcer reading the soccer scores, David spoke on the importance of mind training, team collaboration, and the power and glory of being in the zone. He even went so far as to introduce the idea that sports injuries were related to guilt in the mind. On the Looking for Love show, he spoke about holy relationship and finding divine love within our own hearts. The famous Venezuelan romance radio host was in total agreement that this was what everyone truly desires. The Venezuelans were just as excited to be with David as the Colombians had been. David had happily adapted to the South American 10 p.m. dinner schedules, and he fully embraced their 11 p.m. espresso coffee parties, staying up late to make the most of every opportunity to be together and answer questions. Trust and freedom. It starts with a quote from the Course. The only way to heal is to be healed. The miracle extends without your help, but you are needed that it can begin. Accept the miracle of healing, and it will go forth because of what it is. Journaling. Kirsten. Good morning, Holy Spirit. Yesterday on the TV show, I was happy to find I wasn't feeling nervous, but the presenter asked me a question about war. Would there have been a better reply? How can I tune in to let you speak through me more clearly so that I don't doubt myself? Holy Spirit, it was perfect. You don't know what kind of effect your reply has had on others. And I can assure you that what was said was perfect. Trust in divine order. When you doubt, you block your awareness of me. Even doubting after an event blocks your awareness. Every moment is an opportunity to ask me for guidance. Trust that all things work together for good. Kirsten. Today I'm on workbook lesson 10. My thoughts do not mean anything. What else can you tell me about it? Holy Spirit, your thoughts show you a world. What you perceive comes from your thoughts. When you purify your mind by clearing it of judgment, you will see a forgiven world, a peaceful world, a gentle world, born anew in every moment. You are looking upon a world based on your preconceived ideas of the past. You are making assumptions and drawing conclusions from what you see based on the past. To empty your mind is to release the world from what you think it is. This is freedom. Freedom comes from your state of mind. To forgive is to release yourself from the past. The past is simply ideas in the mind, all of which come from your perceptions. Kirsten, how does this fit with feeling like I'm experiencing something for the first time? Kirsten, Holy Spirit, let's look at the concept of for the first time. The first thought that involved perceptual experience was within time. Eternity does not involve time. The spirit does not have perceptual experiences within time. The ego is the belief in time and space. Bring your awareness to the present moment, the closest point to eternity that you can come to while believing in time and space, and every experience will seem new. Kirsten, I'm thinking back to my teaching experiences. For example, teaching a child to read. Is this a case of the ego teaching ego concepts to itself? Holy Spirit, every moment is an opportunity to experience present love, joining, and joy. Teaching a child to read is a backdrop for joining. Ego concepts such as reading and writing can be used by the Spirit. Your role is to remember who you are and who your brother is in truth. Practice forgiveness and turn to me for guidance when needed. There is nothing new about the world of form. It is a world of images that can be used to free your mind. That is its purpose. Seen from this perspective, every moment is a new opportunity. I can feel the pace for this chapter has to be slow. I think I'm being slowed down. There's just so much in it. I think there's just profound truth coming through from the Spirit, and then just the healing is also very intense. But then coming back to the profound truth and just really letting it sink in as we go through it. What if this is as good as it gets? Our first gathering in Merida was on the topic of holy relationship. There were around 200 people present. I was starting to feel maxed out. Being on stage in front of an audience was too much for me. There was nowhere for the ego to hide, and I certainly couldn't fake being healed or enthusiastic when it wasn't my genuine experience. The following night, we had a movie gathering to watch the movie As Good as It Gets. David gave a talk to set the movie up. After it was over, I joined David on the stage for the post-movie discussion. In the movie, Helen Hunt had cried out that her life and her relationship were not her choice. This line had affected me deeply, but it wasn't until I was on the stage that I felt the full effect of it. I felt undone by that line. And there I was, in the spotlight, unable to move or make a sound. We went for a meal with our organizers after the gathering, and I felt completely disconnected. I couldn't answer any of the questions about how hungry we were or what we wanted to eat. I noticed David giving me a questioning look. I felt separate from him, and was afraid to speak the thoughts and feelings that I couldn't understand. I interpreted the thoughts to mean that everything was wrong, that my life with him wasn't my path, after all. I was afraid David would confirm this if I shared it with him. I kept it to myself that night. Frozen. Journaling. Kirsten. Good morning, Holy Spirit. Last night on the stage, I felt awful, cold and shaky, emotionally stirred up and blocked. I wanted to get down and sit at the back of the room, but I felt paralyzed. I kept asking you for help, but it all felt so disjointed that I couldn't hear your voice. What can you tell me? Holy Spirit, the ego was stirred up. To look back on a scene with regret or fear, wishing it were different, is to perceive through the ego's lens. All things work together for good. Remember, there are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. Kirsten, I'm considering the lessons learned from the experience, but I realize now that I'm perceiving them as lessons for the next time so that I don't have to go through that experience again. But this is still the ego. The lessons learned are already past, over and done. They have nothing to do with an imaginary future. What can you tell me about this? Holy Spirit, you've picked up on this subtle ego trick several times. Trying to protect the future, no matter how disguised it may appear as helpfulness, is the ego. Right now, you can choose to focus on the guilty past or on a hypothetical future, both of which are nowhere but in your imagination, keeping you distracted from the present moment. Or you can give your fears and doubts to me. Remember, there is only one mind. There is no one outside of you judging you. You are doing it all to yourself, and you can let it go now. Kirsten, okay, I give all of my thoughts to you. I want only peace and to know myself as perfect. When I apply my lesson, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world to all of this. I'm amazed at how it is the perfect answer. Doing this to myself is upsetting and makes my whole world meaningless. Thank you. Be gentle. Although I was feeling grateful for the clarity, I still had some residual fear. So I shared my experience from the movie night with David. He lovingly reminded me of the context of awakening. I was going through a disillusionment, a deep transformation of consciousness within which these thoughts and feelings were completely normal. He reminded me that I was answering a very deep call to awaken, and that I had full permission to step back at any time to rest. I felt so much better upon hearing this. When in fear, my default mode was to push myself, to be supportive and helpful, rather than to listen inwardly. It was clear in retrospect that I was afraid of going up on the stage, and now I realized that I need not have taken that action at all. There truly were no expectations of me. David kept reminding me that it was all for me, and that I was completely loved no matter what I did or didn't do. This was very hard for me to accept. Clearly, I had to keep being reminded of the truth. I had to learn to trust in my own devotion, beyond being the best course student or the best traveling companion I could be. Of course I would show up, and of course I would be of full availability and service whenever I could. It truly was my joy. But if the guidance was to step back and rest, I had to learn to honor that too. Pushing myself did not result in miracles. Wrongness and undoing. We start with a quote from the Course. The way out of conflict between two opposing thought systems is clearly to choose one and relinquish the other. If you identify with your thought system and you cannot escape this, and if you accept two thought systems which are in complete disagreement, then peace of mind is impossible. If you teach both, which you will surely do as long as you accept both, you are teaching conflict and learning it. Yet you do want peace, or you would not have called upon the voice for peace to help you. Its lesson is not insane, the conflict is. I was acutely aware of the two thought systems within my mind, the fear-based thought system of the ego and the love-based thought system of the Holy Spirit. When I was not in my right mind, the ego felt as if it was being stretched and pushed simply from being around David, who was a constant and uncompromising reminder of the light. Our 7-month trip was so packed full that there was nowhere for the ego to hide. When resistance was high, ego thoughts would arise in my mind. I'm not David. David has found his calling. He is a talking mystic, but I'm not. I have nothing of value to say. Catching these thoughts helped me to spot the ego trick that sees differences and personality types as real identities, and then it uses the perception of differences as a defense against surrendering to oneness. Over and over again, I saw that my self-concept, or small self, can never know its own best interests, because it is this very self that is being undone. It is made up of memories, feelings, and behaviors which it defends and justifies as being right and being me. Thank God I always remembered to call upon Jesus' often quoted question from the Course. Do you prefer that you be right or happy? Which helped me recognize that I was unhappy and self-righteous. Like a light dawning in my mind, I would remember that I had made a choice. It was a choice to blame David for how I was feeling and to insist that something was wrong. This choice resulted in making him untrustworthy in my eyes. And without trust, I had nothing. No peace of mind, no love, no light, no purpose, no joy, and no David as my mighty companion. I knew that I had to stay very close to David in my mind. The slightest siding with the ego left room for a shadow to come between us and was a sure detour into darkness and pain. With no gap, I was with him in total trust in God, and everything fell back into divine order. Another plan. Carolina, our Venezuelan host's journey with A Course in Miracles, was an experiential approach. She combined her love of music, improvised dance, and theatre with her course study and inner inquiry. It was an intimate healing process with the spirit, which developed into what she called intradanza, inner dance. As the years had progressed, her lessons with the spirit had become classes, which she taught to groups of students. I joined in with several of her classes and found them to be very gentle for my mind. I loved music and movement, and I embraced it all as a welcome gift from the Spirit. My year in the alpine village of Wanaka felt akin to Carolina's experience with Intradanza, the development of a gentle and spacious inner listening. It was a time when my heart was opening and when I was being shown how to follow the music and let the Spirit lead the way. However, since traveling with David, even though he was a consistently loving presence, my path had felt steep and the pace felt very fast. Because I was with someone whose mind was already unplugged from the ways of the world, I was constantly made aware of where my thinking was still hooked into the ego. I was going through a deep dismantling and letting go of specialness. And part of my mind was saying, no, I don't want to give up me. I didn't have the stamina to keep up with David's tireless energy. We were like salmon swimming upstream, and there were many points of having to leap forward and upwards to continue on. David was leaping and jumping in joy, and I was swimming as fast as I could, just trying to keep up with him. Observing the contrast between David's tireless availability and energy and me being on the edge of exhaustion, Carolina shared a parable with me from her childhood. Her 10-year-old cousin ran up to her 4-year-old cousin one day, excitedly grabbing her hand. He began running, saying, "Come and see, I want to show you something." He was so excited that he didn't notice his little sister had fallen and was being dragged across gravel. Her little knees were bleeding. Carolina likened the 10-year-old to David and the 4-year-old to me, which felt accurate to me in that moment. At times I could have curled up in her arms and said, "Yes, it's too hard." Her life certainly seemed easier, her path gentler and slower. Being shown the course lessons through music, movement, and dance within my own bedroom with candles burning, oh, that felt so welcome. Carolina invited me to join her in a partnership to open an Intradanza school with her in Venezuela. It felt like an opportunity to be the teacher rather than the student. With David, I was always the student because I was the one going through intense changes and being shown what was in need of correction, whereas he was always happy. Over the past months, various friends had said, "You're just like David," and "You're a female David." Of course, the presence of the Spirit shining through David and me was the same, but only I knew how active the ego was in my mind at other times. There was still so much to be undone. I had beliefs about who I was, how to be healthy, and how to be a good friend, partner, listener, and lover. And what better way than to partner me up with one who was not impressed or affected by any of it? I was nowhere near the same as David in terms of being in a consistently peaceful state of mind. And it took a constant willingness to be honest and humble in order to stay open to the help that I needed. When I was very honest with myself, I knew that I was meant to stay with David. I was in the midst of a deep undoing process that I wanted to continue with. I felt like a caterpillar in a chrysalis, hanging upside down in the dark, going through a metamorphosis that I had no control over. All I could do was allow the process and trust that at some point I would emerge into the sunshine, light and free. David and I talked about Carolina's invitation to stay open. David and I talked about Carolina's invitation to stay and open a school with her. As always, David was very receptive and open-minded to new ideas. Exploring the possibilities together, David said that I didn't have to leave to dive into something new. He suggested that I invite Carolina to America, where I could travel with her and host intradanza gatherings. This was the perfect solution. Integrity. I stayed in Merida to rest and continue with some internet projects while David went to another city to hold gatherings. The subject of integrity had been raised at gatherings over the past 2 weeks, so I asked the Spirit about it. Journaling. Kirsten. Good morning, Holy Spirit. I feel resistance to getting on with my internet tasks. Tell me about this feeling of not wanting to start. Holy Spirit, what matters is your state of mind. When integrity is in question, your whole world is in question. The tiniest doubt in your mind is guilt, and guilt blocks me from your awareness. This is why integrity is so important, not for reasons of getting tasks done, but for the healing of your mind. You have undertaken a mind training process that is bringing you to a consistently peaceful state of mind. Every time you invite doubt through your lack of integrity, you are stalling the process. I meditate on this for a while and remember recent conversations where I had entertained the possibility that my path could look different to how it is now. David wasn't present during those conversations, and right before he left for his weekend away, I felt a little foggy and distant from him. Kirsten, what else can you tell me about integrity? Holy Spirit, integrity is honesty. To say what you mean and mean what you say is to have integrity with yourself and therefore with everyone. Lack of integrity is dishonesty. I will always guide you to do what is most helpful for all concerned. To refuse, forget, or reject my guidance is clearly a lack of integrity. Whose guidance are you following if you are not following mine? When you align your mind with me, you devote your mind to God, to love, to healing, and to peace. Every time you experience doubt, it is because of your own lack of integrity. It is this simple. The remedy is also this simple. Stop and ask me what I would have you do. Ask yourself if you are being honest about your motivation. Is your desire single or split? When you are aligned with me, your thoughts come from me. Your actions are then guided by our thought, and motivation is pure. When motivation is of God, you feel safe, certain, and able to watch the script play out. When your motivation comes from a split desire, there is a sense of personal responsibility, urgency, and stress, and these feelings are often pushed out of awareness. Whenever you sense the slightest feeling of secrecy, you can be sure the ego is involved. Turn to me. Recognize that your desire is split, and ask yourself if your motivation is of God. Kirsten, thank you, Holy Spirit. Only love is real. Journaling. Kirsten. Good morning, Holy Spirit. What can you tell me about my workbook lesson today? I am not alone in experiencing the effects of my thoughts. Holy Spirit, all minds are joined. Kirsten, how can they seem to be thinking differently? Holy Spirit, all thoughts are either true or false. Thoughts are either from me and are of God, or they are about nothing and are of fear. When the mind releases the ego, all thoughts will be as one. All understanding will radiate and flow throughout the mind. All thoughts will be loving. The mind asleep, believing itself to be separate individual minds, thinking their own thoughts, seems to be thinking apart from God. When you believe yourself to be a private mind, you believe everyone thinks differently. This is what you project, and this is what you perceive. Kirsten, what about Jesus? What did he perceive? Holy Spirit, he resurrected his mind. He released the belief in the ego, which is the belief that you can be separate and think apart from God. His eyes still perceived different bodies, and he heard words spoken by those who believed they were separate from God. But he knew the false was false. He was able to heal because he knew that only love is real, nothing else. With this knowledge, the love, strength, and power of God radiates throughout the open channel of the mind, healing and blessing simply by being itself. All doubt, fear, and death disappear when the light has come. Kirsten, it seems so simple. Holy Spirit, it is. Kirsten, only love is real. I will remember this thought today and always. Thank you. Thank you for joining.